Who messed up, Kwasi Kwarteng or the IMF? Welcome to Mark and Pete. Here's a thought.
The quasi-qualities of Kwasi Kwarteng has quashed a quick quota of backers. The IMF qualms and equity quarters are quintessentially going quackers. Yes, indeed, the world has gone completely quackers. Well, it seems that the International Monetary Fund has openly criticised the UK government, including Kwasi Kwarteng, over its plans for tax cuts and its entire fiscal policy. This is an unusual measure. Normally, when governments set policy and implement such budgets, normally the IMF just sits back and just waits. And I will ask you, Clergyman Pete, do you think that the IMF, by coming out in this way, has fueled more concerns over Kwasi Kwarteng's strategy?
Well, in the defence of the IMF, I would say that this it's not quite unprecedented, but it's unusual, at least for a long time, to have such a dramatic attempt at growth. It reminds me really of back in the 70s, 1972. There was an attempt to fight off stagflation at the time with a dash for growth, and the Conservatives at that point cut taxes and binge borrowed, I guess, and then the pound plummeted and inflation surged. So it's very close to what we've been seeing. I don't know what the long-term implications are going to be. But yeah, it does seem that there's two sides to this. One is you have the finance minister, the chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, announcing a series of measures, which includes cutting taxes and also borrowing in order to pay for that loss in revenue. Yeah. And then the IMF making a public criticism of it. And the two together have caused a reaction in the markets and the pound to drop to subterranean levels, at least initially. I know it bounced back the next day to a certain extent. Now, I don't have the exact figures on that, but there was certainly a bounce back. But this panic that seems to be gripping the markets. I don't think it would have happened if the IMF hadn't come out like that and spoken against it, because that was grist to the mill for the media, ramping up the fear.
Oh yes. Well, let's put it this way. Let's set some of the details here. Now, Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng unveiled the United Kingdom's biggest tax package in 50 years. But the £45 billion cut sparked the fears that the government's borrowing would surge along with the interest rates, and this would cause more problems. Now, what the IMF has done is it sort of typically works to try and stabilize global economies normally, but one of its key roles is to act on economic warnings. Now, the thing is, as Clergyman Pete has highlighted, is that some of their commentary and intervention in this matter, certainly from the public communication, certainly has fueled some concerns. But there's a bit of a history here, isn't there, folks? Yes, that's right. Yes, IMF, UK. Does it sound familiar to those from, say, 1976, when sterling crisis was really at an absolute all-time high? Now, what actually happened is that there was inflation, which was close to 25% in 1975, just continued and continued and continued. And of course, the balance of payments and the deficit just grew and grew and grew. Unfortunately, James Callaghan, yes, he was the Prime Minister at the time, the Labour Prime Minister, had to borrow what seems almost like a trivial sum, but at the time it was $3.9 billion from the International Monetary Fund. Now, at the time, this was the largest loan ever to have been requested from the IMF. Well, I wonder, will Liz Truss have to sort of go there with a bigger begging bowl if her strategy and Kwasi Kwarteng's does not work? So the point here is, whilst the IMF has sent out a message, are they the right type of forms of communication saying, look, Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng, you have to change your strategy. Otherwise, you might be coming back with a bigger begging bowl. I wonder what your opinion is there.
Yeah, well, they may well do that. But I think the thing is, there is a difference in the situation between now and in the 1970s. We're seeing great unrest politically. We're seeing politically in international politics. We're seeing an energy crisis, as well as only a short term that the government's going to be in power before the next election. And all this hastens, it increases the urgency of doing something quickly. And so although, you and I discussed this off air, Mark, what might not have, if we'd been in that position, God forbid, of running the country, we might not have done exactly what they did.
Correct.
But they're at least attempting to address a real issue. And it's not simply a dash for growth as it was characterized in the 1970s. What we're seeing is, as well as reduction in tax, identifying of regional business areas where there will be incentives for businesses to come into the area on a regional basis, not blanket across the country, because of course the government has a policy of trying to level up certain areas of the country. And so it's part of an overall strategy that could work. And I think the IMF sticking their oar in isn't helpful. You could almost say they're guilty of libel or slander for accusing the British government of being what is the word I'm searching for, of not being conscientious about their treatment of the financial planning. But in fact, rather the opposite. They're doing some of the few things that are options that they can actually do, and yet they're taking bold decisions. So I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily a big fan of Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss, at least not yet. But I think I'm a supporter of their attempts to solve this crisis in the financial problems of the country.
Well, there's a few things to note here, folks, because it is evident from my observation, looking at it from a business perspective, that it's early days. And what I'm concerned about is IMF chipping in, as well as other financial institutes making commentary, when really we haven't actually seen some of these measures really implemented completely, because as I said, some of the tax changes don't kick in straight away. But here's some other thoughts. So Moody's, the credit rating agency, said recently that the UK's plans for large unfunded tax cuts was credit negative and would lead to higher persistent deficits amid rising borrowing costs and a weaker growth outlook. Now, that meant that Moody's did not change the UK's credit rating. Okay, but hold on here. We've just been told that we're going to be heading into basically a recession. But no, folks, yes, we actually grew. We grew by 0.25%. What are you saying now, then, to those financial experts who seem to have got that wrong? Now, the thing here is that I think it's no harm to debate, to have scrutiny and analysis over people's strategy. What I'm worried about is when large institutes, as we've already highlighted, start to fuel speculation and rocks the market unnecessarily when actually the policy hasn't been fully implemented and we haven't seen the full results of it. I do agree that I think that's irresponsible. I think if we were here this time next year and we were in the same situation, yes, then there's reason for criticism. But at the moment, I think it's too early. Now, what I will say as a final point on this is that I do agree with you. I would not have done all the measures that we have seen from Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. But I do think that this is something to also think about on a larger scale, folks. United Kingdom is outside of Europe. It is now building out its own policies independent of EU policies, aligned in some cases, yes. But I actually think, and here's a little bit of a prediction, we're going to have a rocky ride. There is no doubt about that. United Kingdom will still have to think very carefully about its credit rating, about the borrowing and that strategy. But I actually think it's nowhere near as bad as some of those mainland European countries. I think we know which ones we're talking about, from Spain to Portugal to Italy and many others, who ironically do have bigger issues to face. And I actually think that some of this, dare I say, is political. And I would say that my feeling is, let's see how the strategy goes. We'll probably be in a better position over the next 3 to 4 months, where people have probably settled. The pound rate will probably get stronger against the dollar, because we've seen it at its pretty much all-time low. And I agree, that has hit business. There's no doubt about that. You know, if you're trying to bring in goods of any kind from abroad, yeah, that's hit your pocket and your margins really hard. But that is only short term. But I think that maybe come beginning of 2023, things will improve. So I think that I agree with you that, first of all, I don't agree with everything that has been done initially. I like the fact they've taken bold measures, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't like the idea of this horrible intervention on IMF coming out with commentary, which I think has been proven to have fueled some concerns and angst and made the markets really rocky. And the worrying thing is that when it affects pensions and many other things, I think that's irresponsible personally.
Yes, I think that's right. I think governments need to be able to make decisions, and then give time for the policies to at least be bed in for a little bit before they get massive criticism. It's just totally unfair. So what has happened where? Well, it's because they've done things that the IMF wouldn't have done. People in the IMF maybe settled in their ways.
We should ask our listeners, do they think that Kwasi Kwarteng is quackers?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. You can put it like that. Is he crackers, or of the IMF messed
IMS.
up? IMS.
What a mess.
That's difficult to say with the wrong false teeth in, let me tell you. But let us know what you think. Just go to markandpete.com. Make sure you're subscribed, and you can leave a comment on this and every episode. But for Mark and myself, it's bye for now. Catch you next time.